Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking right at the intersection of, well, rapid political change and the actual legal tools used to make it happen. We've got the full text of Executive Order 14174 right here. It's a document that really signals a major policy U-turn. But we also have this other interesting source, kind of a meta source, really. It suggests looking at policy through two different lenses.
That's right. So for you listening, our mission here is pretty clear. First, we're dissecting this EUO, this executive order, to understand the precise legal nuts and bolts used to revoke some pretty significant COVID-era rules.
Mandates.
Exactly, mandates. But, and this is key, we're also going to try applying those two viewpoints our other source mentions. You know, the technical analytical view.
Sort of the just the facts approach.
Right. And then the broader, more human-phobic ethical perspective. How does it actually affect people?
Okay, let's get grounded first. EO 14174, signed by President Donald J. Trump, January 21, 2025, published later in the Federal Register. And this order, it really laid the groundwork for some immediate, pretty sweeping changes.
Yeah, and the goal for us isn't just to talk about the politics of it, who won or lost. It's to really detail the mechanism. We want you to understand how just one page of text fundamentally changed the workplace rules for literally millions of federal workers and private contractors, too.
Okay, let's dive in. Let's unpack this thing.
Let's do it.
So we'll start with that analytical mindset, the one focused purely on the details, the text, the history. What does this order do, legally speaking?
Well, the core action is right there in Section 1. It's titled simply revocation. No ambiguity.
Pretty direct.
Very. And this is where the president exercises that power to just nullify policies that were put in place by a previous administration.
Yeah.
What's really striking here is the precision. It's laser-focused. It specifically targets two earlier executive orders, both, interestingly, signed on the exact same day, September 9, 2021.
Which right away highlights that dynamic, doesn't it? The power of one executive action just erase another one, sometimes years down the line. Can you walk us through which specific orders got revoked?
Sure. So Section 1, subsection A, it revokes Executive Order 4042. The title of that one was Ensuring Adequate COVID Safety Protocols for Federal Contractors.
Okay, federal contractors. That affects basically any private company doing business with the government, right?
That's exactly right. It cast a really wide net. It set up specific safety requirements they had to meet.
So that's a huge group. Millions of workers in the private sector suddenly under a different, or maybe, no, federal rule there.
Potentially, yeah. We removed the federal floor. And then Section 1B revokes Executive Order 420043. That one was titled Coronavirus Disease 2019 Vaccination for Federal Employees.
Ah, the vaccine mandate for the government's own workforce.
Correct. Those were really the twin pillars of the federal government's COVID workplace policy framework at the time.
So you have one administration using this tool, the executive order, to directly undo the policies of the previous one. It signals a really immediate shift in approach in philosophy. The text itself is short, concise, but it immediately dismantles these two policies affecting, as you said, huge numbers of workers. Federal employees, sure, but also that whole vast ecosystem of federal contracting. Now, while this definitely shows how efficient executive power can be, I mean, very quick action, does this kind of precision, this ability to create policy and then, poof, make it disappear so quickly, doesn't that make things less stable, less predictable for the people affected?
That is the fundamental tension, isn't it? Especially with executive orders. And it's exactly why understanding the technical mechanism, the how, is so important. When a policy is built purely by executive action, like these were, its foundation is, well, inherently less stable than something passed by Congress as legislation.
Because the next person in office can just use the same tool to undo it.
Precisely. The durability of these specific workplace standards was always essentially tied to the political will of whoever occupied the White House at that moment. It wasn't baked into law by the legislative branch.
That's a really crucial distinction. Thinking about that vulnerability, that sort of shifting ground, it leads us right into the other perspective we wanted to explore, the human one. We've dissected what happened in the legal text. Now let's think about who was actually affected. How did their day-to-day lives, their jobs, their workplaces change when these safety and vaccination requirements just vanish?
Right. We need to zoom out from the text and look the real-world ripple effects, the ethical dimensions too, perhaps. This policy reversal, it instantly removes that federally mandated baseline for workplace health related to COVID. For the millions of individuals caught up in this, employees, managers, business owners, it creates an immediate kind of policy vacuum.
Okay, let's break that down maybe. Let's take the contractor side first. EO 140402 gone. For companies doing business with the feds, those mandates meant real costs, right? Setting up testing, tracking vaccinations maybe, paperwork, possibly hiring people just to manage compliance.
Absolutely. There were significant operational adjustments and costs involved for many contractors. So when EO 14042 is revoked, that burden, that cost center, disappears. For many businesses, that's a clear, quantifiable plus for their bottom line. Less regulation, lower operating costs in that specific area.
Makes sense from a business perspective.
It does. However, let's say the human side of that coin is complex. Removing that cost burden also means shifting potential liability and risk. That federal floor for safety protocols is gone. So now workplace safety standards regarding COVID, if any exist beyond general OSHA rules, depend entirely on maybe state laws, which vary widely, or just individual company policy.
So what might be a financial gain for the company could translate into potentially increased health risks for their employees, depending on where they live or the specific choices their employer makes now.
That's the dynamic, precisely. The federal standard is removed, leaving a patchwork. And then if we pivot to the federal employees, the ones covered by EO 14043, the vaccination mandate, the implications there are just as deep, just as personal.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Think about employees who maybe complied with that mandate, got vaccinated, perhaps specifically just to keep their federal job. Now suddenly, that requirement is null and void.
That must create some complicated feelings, at the very
No
least.
doubt. And think about the operational side for the government itself. HR departments, agency heads, they had to instantaneously react. Policies on hiring, on reasonable accommodations, medical leave, even things like telework eligibility all might need rewriting practically overnight, stemming from this single page. The sheer scale of that immediate HR and operational adjustment across the entire federal government is, well, immense.
Wow. Yeah, that really highlights why we need both perspectives, doesn't it? Understanding the exact legal change, the order numbers, the dates, that tells us the what, the technical story. But understanding the consequences, the policy vacuum, the immediate shifts in costs, risks, job requirements, the sheer administrative churn that tells us the human story. That's what makes it matter to people's lives.
And that profound shift, that change in the rules of the game, it affects the national conversation almost instantly.
Okay, let's pivot then to the last part of the document itself, Section 2, General Provisions. Now, often this stuff can look like, legal boilerplate, easy to skim over, but these provisions actually define the limits of the order. They tell us what the president's action doesn't do, or isn't intended to do.
They're absolutely crucial, even if they seem dry. They're essential for showing the president is acting within the established constitutional framework. Take a look at Section 2, subsection 2 and
Right.
2. This language is very careful. It says the order does not impair existing statutory authority that Congress has already granted to agencies.
Meaning the president isn't trying to override laws passed by Congress with this order.
Exactly. And it also says it doesn't mess with the functions of the Office of Management and Budget, OMB, particularly when it comes to budget matters.
Okay, why is that specific call-out mentioning OMB and existing laws? Why is that so important in an order that's all about reversing previous mandates?
Because it signals that the president is operating within the executive lane. The order has to make clear it's not attempting to unilaterally rewrite laws passed by Congress or seize control of the government's budgeting process, which is constitutionally distinct. It essentially confirms this revocation applies only to those prior executive actions. It's not challenging the broader legal or budgetary framework already set by Congress. It's a safeguard against appearing like executive overreach.
Got it. So it's like the president saying, I'm using the power of the executive pen here, but I'm not trying to grab the legislature's power or the power of the purse.
That's a good way to put it. And then Section 2B adds another dose of reality. Implementation has to follow applicable law and, crucially, depends on the availability of appropriations, money Congress has allocated.
Right. Even a swift reversal like this still has to operate within the existing legal and financial constraints of the government. Okay, and finally, we get to Section 2C. This one feels particularly important for, the average person listening, especially if maybe they feel harmed or disadvantaged by this policy reversal. This is the no private right of action clause, right?
That's the one. And it's pretty standard in EOs, but its impact is significant.
How does it practically limit someone's ability to, say, challenge this in court?
It states very clearly that this order is not intended to and does not create any right or benefit that someone can enforce in court against the United States. So Think about that employee we mentioned. Maybe someone who felt their workplace became less safe after these mandates were revoked. They might feel wrong. They might have a grievance.
But they can't sue the government based solely on this executive order, arguing the order itself gave them a right that was then violated.
Exactly. They can't point to EO 14174 and say, this document proves the government owes me legally enforceable safety standards that it then took away. The order explicitly closes that door.
So, in simple terms, the order asserts presidential power to make the change, but it simultaneously shields the government from lawsuits directly stemming from the existence or impact of that change itself. Power asserted, but direct legal accountability for the consequences is limited by this clause.
That's the effect. Now, if we zoom out one last time, connect all these pieces, Executive Order 14174 really serves as a textbook example. It shows how quickly, how decisively executive power can be used to signal and enact fundamental shifts in national priorities, especially when reversing policies that were themselves created by prior executive action. Yeah. It really laid bare how vulnerable that whole COVID policy structure was because it was built largely on EOs.
Yeah, we've really seen how just one page of text, when you break it down carefully, reveals these incredibly deep, immediate changes, affecting millions of people, shifting costs, risks, job security almost instantaneously.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? I think one key takeaway is just how potentially fragile policies enacted solely by executive order can be.
Yeah.
Their lifespan can be directly tied to who holds the presidency.
Right. Our look at EO 14174 shows that this kind of rapid governance is definitely possible. You can make big changes fast. But maybe that speed comes at the cost of long-term stability, of broader buy-in or consensus. And since this specific order reverses mandates dealing with something as fundamental as workplace health and safety, things that touch millions of lives directly, it leads us to our final thought for you to consider. A bit provocative, perhaps. Is there a tension here? Does the very efficiency of using executive orders for swift, maybe even necessary, changes on critical issues like public health potentially undermine the kind of stable, predictable national policy we need? Should these really big fundamental standards ideally go through the slower, more deliberative, maybe more durable process of legislation passed by Congress to truly last?
Or is the speed of executive action sometimes essential? That's the balance, the tension, definitely worth mulling over.